Looks like we're all making it back in now.
Yes, that's good. Let's see here.
Eric, while we're waiting,
Yeah.
just a comment. I have a biracial grandson. Are you there?
I am, yes.
And he's biracial, and I keep being asked, why do you call him Black? And my answer is because society calls him Black.
Yeah.
Just like Obama calls himself Black, yet his mom, and my daughter is his mom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's called Black. So
it's so interesting. And your grandson is definitely not alone, Patty, as well. And when we see that, you'll have sometimes some critics and race scholars saying, you know, is this sort of the effects of the one drop rule from 200 years ago?
sure.
Yeah, it's
Historically, yeah.
It sure is. Yeah, like I always think of as we're waiting for everybody else here, the famous Supreme Court case of Plessy versus Ferguson that established separate but equal and gave us Jim Crow. Homer Plessy, the black man in that case, was actually known as an octoroon at the time, where he was only 1/8 black. And octoroon Americans, my students have no idea what that means because we changed the meaning of race. Octoroon isn't a racial category anymore, but at the time, and it still designated somebody that, again, you're 7/8 white, but you're still discriminated against because of the black identity, which is really interesting as well. So I think that we've got everybody back now. So I'm going to jump back in here with some of the bias, and I might not take, come on. All right, I'm going to hope that
it's doing it again. I hope they catch it.
Yeah, I hope so too. I'm going to proceed like they catch it again, and hopefully that is the case. Let's do a exercise here where I just have a question for everybody. Feel free to unmute or you can put in the chat and somebody can say, this is just a simple game. I've chosen a rule about some sequence of 3 numbers, this rule that they obey. These numbers you give me have to obey the rule I'm thinking of. All your job is to guess what my rule is. And you can give me any 3 numbers and I'll tell you if it's my rule or not. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? And so all I'm going to tell you about this is that the sequence of 3 numbers 2, 4, 8.
Open back up their rooms again so they can rejoin their facilitators. So please be patient.
All right, 3rd time's a charm.
It's just giving us 10 minutes.
Eric, you're muted, FYI. Eric, I just want to let you know you're muted. So.
Yeah, it's just giving us 10 minutes at a time, unfortunately.
Oh, they must have set the time.
Oh, yeah, it makes sense. Thanks for reminding me about my mute too. I appreciate it. As people are jumping in though, I can take some guesses from people if you want from my rule here. And just as a refresher, I have a rule that any 3 numbers given together has to obey. And the only clue I'm giving you is that the numbers 2, 4, and 8, it obeys my rule. So you can ask what my rule is, but I will tell you if your 3 numbers obeys my rule or not.
So I would say 3, 6, 12.
And I would tell you, Marissa, that 3, 6, 12 does obey my rule. Any other guesses? Does anybody know what my rule is? Oh, sorry, Patty, you're muted.
I see that Haley put in the chat box 16, 32, and 64.
I will say that 16, 32, and 64, that does obey my rule.
I would say your rule is that every number is multiplied by 2 in the sequence.
It's a good guess. I will tell you that is absolutely not my rule.
I should say not by 2. I meant it's doubled. I apologize. Wrong thought.
Oh, no problem. Got you. The numbers doubling also is not my rule.
Okay,
and that's
175 and 98.
175 and 98 does follow my rule.
Maybe your rule is that they're all even or all odd.
Oh, good guess, Penny. that is unfortunately not my rule though. And
Is your rule just that every number is greater than the number that precedes it?
Marissa, you win the prize. That is absolutely my rule. Good job, everybody. So we got that. You're like, what are we doing talking about this number game here? Well, did you notice with just a handful of guesses that we have that nobody got something that said it doesn't obey my rule? Did you notice that I didn't say, I said that it wasn't my rule to a few of you. I never said something disobeyed my rule, did I? That's really interesting, isn't it? Every single time I said, yep, that obeys my rule. Yes, that obeys my rule. And people are able eventually, sometimes not as fast as Marissa did. Marissa got this pretty fast, so good job again. But 77% of the people that take this guess, they are able to guess the rule without ever hearing the answer no. Isn't that interesting? There are so many other questions you could ask, whether you're saying like 9, 1,000,000, and 1 billion. You could do something like that, couldn't you? Or you could say negative r squared a and b, or something like that. Like, does that follow your rule? There's so many other ways to address that question, isn't there? If we pull the slideshow back up and I minimize here, that's an example of confirmation bias. And so we want to hear yes so much as individuals that we're always sometimes asking questions, as this exercise shows, which is based on a pretty famous psychological study from the 60s, that we always want to hear that something does follow the rule, even if getting told no might get us to the correct answer sometimes. So it's really interesting to think about those biases that we all have with that example. One other example that I would like to talk about is that, kind of like the picture we looked at too, we might miss some, sorry, I stopped my share here, that we can sometimes not see everything that is actually going on, I guess. I have a selective attention test that I would like everybody to engage in. Everybody can see my screen? All right. And
No.
Count how many times.
Okay, let's go back here. And I want to make sure that my screen, I apologize, everybody, is going to be shared now. Okay, so this is just a very quick test. And all anybody's going to do is just count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. Is everybody ready? Okay.
Players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count?
Does anybody need to see that one more time? Okay, let's see. Oh, I see that we have a chat here. Okay. As you can see, sorry, I ignored the chat feature here. It's 15.
The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla?
Did anybody see a gorilla? Let's see, maybe now I can successfully pull the chat up here. Okay, yeah, they saw a gorilla dance. There's a gorilla in the room. Yeah. So we want to see that one more time. Don't count the passes this time. And let's just see if we rewind it. Total objective reality. there is a person in a gorilla suit that went through and thumped his chest and walked through.
This video is from research by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris.
That's pretty fascinating, isn't it? Research doing this experiment over and over shows that about half of the people watching this that have never seen or heard of it before, of course, are unable to see the gorilla. That gorilla is objectively there, but we just miss it sometimes. So fascinating. And so we have that, you know, or, you know, if we've seen that, you know, and you want to watch another video, we can try it again with an updated version here.
The monkey business illusion.
So let's try to watch
Count
it
how
now.
many times the players wearing white pass the ball.
Did everybody see the gorilla
The
that
correct
time?
answer is 16 passes.
Everybody saw it that time, and it's like, oh, I can't believe I missed it the first time. That's really great.
Did you spot the gorilla?
We got that.
For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half missed the gorilla. If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color or the player on the black team leaving the game?
Did anybody see the curtain change? No. Did anybody see that one of the players wearing black just left? Let's check it out again. Let's check it out again here.
Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is
gone.
changing from red to gold.
So these are really
When
great
you're looking for a gorilla,
examples
you often miss other.
of our selective bias, and we're all susceptible to it when we're trying to see our world. And of course, with that, I think the example is really good because that background almost in a lot of ways is the structure of things, and we don't really focus on the structure if we're looking at the individuals a lot of times. And if we're focusing on one aspect of society, even if another changes, as it did with the players in the black shirt, when one leaves, it's tougher to say something is there. If we were asked if the black team should get another player, we might say, well, of course not, because then that would be unfair. But we might have actually missed the fact that a group became disadvantaged if they were having a ball pass competition or something like that. So we have, you know, the selective attention issues. We have self-serving biases too that, again, seek to reaffirm what we think and feel and know. And then also, and sometimes especially with racial issues, is there's a decline bias that I've seen evidence for people having that says, well, you know, young people today don't work as hard and everything is this way or that way, and we're all doomed. And, you know, every generation thinks the upcoming generation will be the end of humanity pretty much. That either it's an end times and a race war is coming, or just a really kind of negative outlook. And so if you have a decline bias, it's sometimes really difficult to see reality if you're always kind of looking for the bad in everything to say. So to kind of wrap things up with the time that we have here, and just kind of thinking how this relates to language, I definitely want to go through some of the language components with a little bit of the time that we have left. And I'm hoping I get a couple minutes here at the end for a couple questions or comments here, is that with our reality here, and we think about what microaggressions actually are, you know, and it's not that overt racism of the past, but it's just really brief and common things that you hear or that you see or that you're exposed to that have some type of hostile or derogatory or even negative connotation. you know, and we can look between micro insults for a person or group, and then even invalidations, for example. And I kind of want to conclude with everything here, given the time that we have left, that the words that you say matter. And even if you think, well, I'm not racist and I am completely fine and everybody is equal to me, it's that issue of equality and equity again, isn't it? Because if you treat everybody the same, not everybody is coming with the same background or experiences. Something really powerful, if I can jump down here, is what's very, very common in my experience for people that want to be anti-racist is saying, I don't see or care about race at all, that the only true race is the human race. And what happens with that is I remember I had an African student many years ago who just spoke up right in class with sort of an annoyed look on his face. And he just said that if you don't see race, then you don't see me. And it always stuck with me because of how powerful it was. And my student went on to explain too, that his race and the way that he's reflected in society, it's part of who he is. It is part of his day-to-day consciousness, if you will. W.E.B. Du Bois always talked about a double consciousness that Black Americans face, where they're American, but they're also Black American, whereas white individuals typically think of themselves as just American. And so that color blindness sometimes, even if it's subtle, and you tell somebody like your race doesn't matter to me, you have to be really careful that you're not saying that the person doesn't matter to you. Even if you let me kind of work up here, when we're talking immigration, there is a big difference in effect if you're talking about undocumented immigrants versus illegal aliens. It's still referring to the same individuals, but they have very different connotations. People of color is a agreed upon way. It's respectful. When I talk about my students of color, there is a big difference between saying that versus my colored students. And I think something like that makes sense to everybody. But I've also been asked, you're just changing it. What people of color and colored people is the same thing. And it's not, because it's about that tone and that intent. And notice that you might be completely oblivious to the fact that you didn't know that calling somebody colored is a derogatory term. You know, but it doesn't change the social reality and the way that things are constructed that it actually is. And one thing that we saw from the slides when Patty was asking me about the data on African Americans from 2001, the word Black is not capitalized. And just now you're starting to see more government data and individuals capitalize the name. We like names to be capitalized because it's a sign of respect. And we might just glance over that, but it's really interesting when you see white and Black to kind of notice if they're capitalized or not when you are filling out forms and memos or talking about something. And not only that, but wow, when I have students that will say there's a difference between talking about Black Americans and the Blacks, or Black issues versus the Black issues, because doesn't one sort of put somebody outside of that fence and it sees them as an other or a different, you know, those people. Like, these people need to learn, like right away, you know, you're going to have an issue when it comes to that offensiveness, you know. And so we have all of these other examples with our language. You know, where are you really from? I can't pronounce your name, so can I just call you Bob? You know, all of these things like this make a really big difference. And I apologize everybody for the show getting cut short a little bit, and I'm more than happy to share some more info, or feel free to email me. I do want to conclude this session with the little bit of time we have left, though, by talking about the effect of this language, whether you're aware of it or not, is that we're having new research really come in that shows that these microaggressions, that these racial insults and slights, and just if it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and oh, you know what, for a Black girl, you're really pretty, something like that seeks to say good, and oh, you know what, Jerome, you're so well spoken. It sounds like you're complimenting somebody, but look at the meaning behind saying that. And if Jerome is African American, saying how well he speaks, is that sort of saying that most people that look like him aren't as articulate? and so that's something to think about. And the effects, any one slip up is not going to damage an individual sense of purpose. But what our research is showing now that we have coming in is that there is a very strong cumulative effect on anxiety and self-perception and self-esteem and levels of anxiety and depression and alienation. And we're seeing really strong effects because of the totality of all these little day-to-day things. So it might seem like everybody's being, too worried about things. And of course, some language can go really far. There's a debate about Latino, Latina, and Latinx right now, for example. Our current studies show that only about 4% of Latino Americans actually use or approve of the term Latinx. And so that's something that's really going to have to look at going forward. We categorize Hispanic Americans as an ethnicity, even though most Hispanic Americans view it as part of their race. We have these racial issues that are unresolved from the past that we have to deal with. And even if there's examples of language that might seem like, oh, everybody is so sensitive, does that cover up those real issues that over time can diminish a person's humanity, as Dr. Benton said? Even if it's non-racial, we know those insults add up, don't they? If somebody calls you sloppy once, bad day. When you get it over and over for years and years, it can add up. So again, I apologize for not having time to get to a couple other activities. I hope you at least got a little bit of food for thought for this from the breakout activity. And I know I only have a couple minutes left, and I see the chat box is sort of filling up here. Any other questions, comments? If you feel like there was anything that needed an example, I do appreciate everybody being here today, of course, too. And
Right,
again,
Eric.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Patty.
I say this has been great, Eric. I think we all have several takeaways from this session. And I think what we'll do is try to make sure in the big group that we share your email address again.
Yeah,
Want to follow
as
up.
soon as we leave here in a minute, the first thing I will do is I will put it in the chat box for everybody as well. And I would say to just come full circle with our image of the ladies and the skulls too, is just that you might see things one way, but your neighbor or your coworker or your client or your patient might be seeing things much differently. And so it's always good to talk. And when in doubt, your best bet is to just ask, somebody. And you can always ask somebody in a respectful way. I always talk about questioning, but being respectful. So if you're not familiar with people who were born in Africa, and I've had African students tell me this, not African Americans, but individuals who are African, and people want to know about Sierra Leone, or they don't know much about Somalia. And so rather than saying, do you guys have houses? And I've had students tell me that they've been asked that. You can get your answer. That's good. You want to know, but isn't it better to say, like, can you tell me about where you lived? Better than that assumption, because does that person interpret, do you have houses, as meaning that you're just out on the plain, with a loincloth and there's giraffes and elephants running around? Does that make sense to everybody? So,
Yes.
always question, but just that respectful way is good, and try to see it from everybody's sides.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We are going to flip